Friend, Shabbat Shalom to everyone. It's nice seeing everyone here. You know, water is the fundamental substance of life. Without water, life is impossible. The consensus is that people can survive for around 3 days without water. 60% of a man is made up of water, and 55% of a woman is made up of water. I don't understand the difference, but okay. And water makes up 71% of the Earth's surface. Now, this information this evening has tremendous religious significance. The entire festival of Sukkot, and then Shmini Atzeret, is about water and rain. So let me give you several examples of that, and it's always there, but when you put them all together, it's like a bucket of water in your face. So here's the deal. The lulav and etrog, okay? Each plant, the myrtle, the palm, the willow, the etrog, each comes from the land of Israel, and each is distinguished by its connection to water. And since Sukkot comes before Israel's season of rain, the holiday is a time to thank God for the summer's abundance and ask for another good year of crops. The ritual, look, I love, lulav and etrog, but it's really a rain dance. And it's interesting, in synagogues, you parade around the congregation. It's our version of a rain dance. It might not be understood that way, but if you go anthropologically back, it's clearly a rain dance. The leaves of the 3 trees are joined together with an etrog shaken in 3 times in 6 different directions. And the ritual movement is meant to draw blessing from all the corners of the earth and send blessings to all of creation. And the primary blessing is, let it rain. Now here is something that most people don't know about Sukkot. During the time of the temple, and people say, someone came up to me said, when you talk about the temple, you're talking about the New Reformed temple? And I said, no. That's why I don't want to call the New Reformed temple a temple. No, the temple we're talking about is the temple in Jerusalem that was destroyed in the year 70 by the Romans. So during Sukkot, there was a unique form of offering that was brought on the Mizbeach, on the altar. And one rabbi explains it the following way. He says, each morning of Sukkot, a water libation was poured on the Mizbeach, the altar, when the early morning sacrifices was brought. Okay? The pouring of the water was celebrated with a lot of fanfare. And in the evening before, masses of people would congregate on the Temple Mount to watch the great sages of the generation dance, perform, and sing in celebration of the event. So all the rabbis and sages would get up and dance. There were these massive lamps whose light illuminated the entire Jerusalem. And this occurred each night of Sukkot except on Shabbat, in the first night. And our sages wrote, whoever did not see this celebration never saw a celebration in his days. In other words, this was the greatest celebration. This was and it was from Jane used to work in a synagogue where the bat mitzvah had a bat mitzvah cruise, where everyone was invited on a cruise ship for a cruise, in honor of the bat mitzvah. It was equivalent to that. They didn't have cruise ships, but it was that big. I wasn't exaggerating. And the celebration was called the rejoicing of the house of drawing. It's called Beit HaShoivah, meaning the drawing of water. Now, why was a special offering of water on Sukkot? Because the Talmud says that the world is judged for water on Sukkot. We bring offerings so the rain for the coming year should be blessed. So during Sukkot, in the morning service, there is a ceremony called the Hoshana, which is when you parade around the congregation. And the final day of Sukkot is known as Hoshana Rabbah and has this strangest and most remarkable prayer service. So what happens is you have the Torahs, you're marching around with the lulav and etrog, And after there's this alphabetic acrostic that in Hebrew, and at the end of it, it says, Hoshana na, save, please. And then, so this is what happens. But on Hoshana Rabbah, what happens is you put down your lulav and etrog, and then you recite, you ask God for His to save us. And so, what do you do then? You take your willows and you beat them. Nothing is happening. Something's out to come off. Nothing's coming off. But anyway, I guess it's going to be a drought this year. So you beat your willows, and while the original practice is unclear, there's a little evidence that the lulav shaking ritual is a glorification of pray for rain, and the rattling of these leaves is a sound of rainfall. So again, it's a water ceremony. I'm making a good case for water. I don't need to make a good case for water, but water on Sukkot. Okay, but let's go on. What about water in the sukkah? If it's raining, do we go into the sukkah? And should we sit inside because we don't want to make ourselves uncomfortable? And according to the Mishnah, we're allowed to leave the sukkah when it's raining hard enough for the water would spoil our food. In other words, what's supposed to happen is if you're drinking soup and you're eating soup in the sukkah and the rain is so bad it's hurting your soup, you're able to leave the sukkah. But except for that, you have to stay in the sukkah. So it's water, 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 water. Okay. But tonight is Shmini Atzeret. And in synagogue on Shmini Atzeret, we even go further. There's a prayer called Geshem, which means rain. And so what is supposed to happen is you recite this prayer for rain. Let me give you a little bit of a feel for it. O God and God of our ancestors, remember the patriarchs who was drawn to you like Mayim, water. Blessed him as a tree planted amid flowering waters. You protected and saved him when he went through fire and water. You loved him as he sowed righteousness upon all the world's waters. For his sake, do not withhold water. Then you go again. Remember, you're getting the picture? It's going to be water, 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 water. And why do we say Geshem, the prayer for rain, at the end of Sukkot? Because they didn't want to pray for rain at the beginning of Sukkot, because then it would rain on your sukkah and you wouldn't be able to be in it. I know, I can see you guys are really interested in this. Okay, so I'm going to keep going. So, why am I talking about this? First of all, we should know what the holiday is really about. And it's not just about eating in a shack and talking about how beautiful the sukkah is. It's a really serious issue about water, about our connection with water. So then I started reflecting, we're living in a society where water is like one of the major issues. And I know the House of Representatives is arguing who's going to be the next Speaker of the House. But I wish they would talk about things relating to the future of our civilization. And the future of our civilization has to do with water scarcity. I mean, just think about this. Sukkot is the most relevant holiday because it raises our consciousness about that which is of existential importance to us. I mean, I'm going to give you some of the statistics. About 2 billion people worldwide do not have access to safe water to drink today, and roughly half of the world's population is experiencing severe water scarcity for at least part of the year. Only 0.5% of water on Earth is usable and available fresh water, and with climate change, the water supply is endangered. Water supplies stored in glaciers and snow-covered are projected for further decline over the course of a century. Someone, who told me they went, one of our members went on an Alaska cruise, And they said they couldn't believe how the glaciers were moving back, receding. The sea level rise is projected to extend salination of groundwater. That's what's happening in the Mississippi. Water quality is affected by climate change, and higher water temperatures will lead to more frequent droughts and floods and more sediment, which leads to more pathogens. And I mean, it's disastrous. Climate change, population growth, increased water scarcity will put pressure on the food supply. This is the last Sunday, we had this wonderful Sukkot event. And it was fun and joyful. And our kids were having a good time making whatever they were making. But let's face it, I don't think most of us looks at this and say, oh my God, this is a slap in the face about what we're facing as a society. And this is something really, this is an adult responsibility, a concern. So Sukkot has much to teach us. When you dig deep into Jewish tradition and reflect upon it, it's so wise. I mean, Sukkot is not just about building a shack and walking around with a lulav and etrog. It's about our dependence on rain, the precariousness of water. And we should have the same concern about water that our ancestors did 2,000 years ago. I mean, if you live in the land of Israel, what are they always worried about? Is there enough rain to fill up the Kinneret? It's like the weather report. What's the level of Lake Kinneret, Lake Tiberias? They're so in tune, and only 50% of Israeli water comes from that now, because most of the water comes from the aquifer or the desalination. But there's this constant concern how much water we have, because if the water isn't high enough in Lake Kinneret in the northern part of Israel, they're fearful of salination. So let's get a grip on reality and recognize that deep within our tradition, there are very important, relevant messages. And if we ignore them at our detriment. Sukkot is so relevant. And if there's one thing that we can all agree upon, is that water is sacred. And a responsible human race would recognize that. And we ignore it at our own peril. Thank you, Sukkot, for bringing us the enlightenment that we need. Let's continue in our service.